But I knew by then that's filmmaking, that things are always going to go wrong and you have to ride that big dog in some way, you know.
George Miller, born on the 3rd of March 1945, is an Australian film director, producer, and screenwriter for both TV and film. He's managed to be nominated for several awards and has won an Academy Award, a BAFTA, and a Golden Globe. To celebrate Furiosa's digital release this week, here's a quick recap of George Miller's filmography, with quick delves for each of them, from the Babe movies to the Mad Max Saga, along with my opinions and final ranking for the 12 I watched.
For me, movies are visual music. They should almost be read purely with the syntax of cinema. So I'm really excited to be doing this.
At this point, we need to decide whether this preoccupation with violence is necessarily unhealthy.
To start talking about George Miller, we need to talk about Byron Kennedy, who was a producer of amateur short films throughout the 60s and 70s. These were Freeze, an underground film, The Devil in the Evening Dress, and St. Vincent's Review film, along other shorts and the first 2 Mad Max installments. In 1971, he co-produced Violence in Cinema Part 1 with George Miller, about a disturbing monologue, which was awarded 2 Australian Film Institute Awards. The success was so great that they started the Kennedy Miller Production Company, now known as Kennedy Miller Mitchell, to produce their films together and push the boundaries on the ways one can experiment with filmmaking. Sadly, Byron passed away in a helicopter accident at the age of 33. Even though one could understand Miller would back away from the main thing that reminded him of his best friend, he kept on producing TV shows and movies, along with his other producer collaborators, which are his twin brother John and his other brother Bill Miller. At the start of his career, he also worked as an ER doctor and started saving money for what would become his first magnum opus.
American International presents Mad Max, the maximum force of the future.
Mad Max came together just out of luck, really. The story wasn't exact, and ultimately it was an experiment for George to form his style. It was shot pretty much illegally, but it's great how the camera is always lower on the chase sequences, so you get the feel of the cars and the blurry road being the main characters. In the editing process, he claimed,
You know, myself in the kitchen where we were cutting, all the mistakes I made. And it was a really great lesson because I thought, gee, you know, I should have done that, I should have done this. And luckily, when the film came together, it did work. I mean, suddenly it gets shown in Japan and France and all around the world. When the opportunity came up to do a second one, I was able to do all the things that I had learnt from that experience.
He also says it was a creative challenge for him.
In fact, the first movie was really, for me, a very brutal experience in terms of creativity. I really thought I wasn't cut out to make movies.
If this movie hadn't done as well as it did, the last 50 years of movies would be very different. The film cost $350,000 to make and made $100 million in revenue, and has become a cult classic nowadays. In my opinion, I think this is the best of the saga. It has that action-leathered, late 70s style, 6 stunts and plot twists, and a terrific performance by Mel Gibson descending into madness. It's crazy to think he was just casted by chance.
I became interested in film, not with any regard to any sort of career or anything like that. I was a kid who grew up with my twin brother in rural Australia. Before there was television, before there was internet, there was just play, school, and the Saturday matinee, and that had a massive influence on me, of course. And the first Mad Max, which was the first feature that we worked on, I really wanted it to be a film in which, as Hitchcock said, they don't have to read the subtitles in Japan, that they're read purely as a bit of visual music. I didn't really know what I was doing then. None of us were experienced, even Mel Gibson, who's played Mad Max. He was straight out of drama school, never really worked on a movie before.
Besides some cringy moments, the film's worst trait is the lack of context. They really force you into this world without any context. 8 out of 10. Gibson went on to make his career bigger with movies such as Braveheart, which he also directed. But let's not get ahead of ourselves.
How do we approach characters? Characters absolutely drive the narrative. If you go back to the earliest times, let's go back to the Greeks and so on, it's all about what characters want and how those wants bring them into conflict. You know, it's purely an intuitive thing when you actually cast someone. You can't really articulate exactly why someone feels right. Having worked with dancers on Happy Feet, I realise they have a great precision. I mean, it's amazing what they can do. The timing is just amazing. And if you like, are able to internalise all of that, then you have a really fine actor.
Mad Max 2.
So the second film, I think very perceptive actually, was quite a big shift, both in the themes of the story and in the techniques.
Mad Max 2 The Road Warrior had way more budget, $4 million, and made $23 million. It also had a more clear direction, but also time limitations. The direction shows in how the story now has a better context and performances, regarding how Miller wanted to reimagine Western by mixing it with post-apocalyptic movies. And the time restraints shows in how the movie unfolds itself.
Even though it was much more physically demanding, we had more budget, but we had, for complexity of reasons, we didn't have a lot of time. The second film was shot in continuity, because the story allowed you to do that. So basically we ran out of screenplay at one point, and for one day we didn't shoot while I figured out with Terry Hayes what we should do.
It's about Max and his new pals arriving at a gasoline plantation while being stalked by the gang of a guy in his underwear. But meh, just George embracing the wasteland and the plain chaos it comprehends. The side quests don't offer much except for nudity and gratuitous animal cruelty. It's very superficial and simple. The villain is a joke, and the population on the plantation on the gas rig has barely any personalities or background. The third act stretches so hard and it's so nihilistic without any reason, especially because of the kill count and that kid, who is also the narrator of the movie. That was so dumb. 5 out of 10.
Well, ain't we a pair? Raggedy Man.
The franchise went into a hiatus after Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome, but it wasn't a failure. Its budget was about $10 million, and it made more than $35 million. They just finished the trilogy they had planned. I don't have much to say apart from what everyone has said about this one. Tina and Mel are great. The first half holds up pretty well, as Max entered this town where the leader is this corrupt woman who wants all the power, and whoever tells her no is sent to a fighting dome in which people throw a bunch of random weapons and they can jump around. Sick concept, but from there it goes off the rails. Max escapes the town and is luckily found by the Lord of the Fleas desert version kids. They get separated. A few of them get to Buttertown again. It starts having this family fun tone, and in the end they repopulate Sydney. Kind of dumb and unsettling, and Tina Turner just forgives Max for whatever reason, even though Buttertown will probably fall into an insurgence, and Max just wanted to get some parts of a car. I feel like every Mad Max movie, but the first and last ones, is a chapter in an anthology of stories, so you don't really get a lot of context besides what they tell you in the last scenes of each movie. 5 out of 10. One can definitely tell this was made by two different people, since Miller abandoned the project halfway through after the death of Byron and gave the gig to George Ogilvy. Sorry if I butchered his name. He also made The Crossing with Russell Crowe. That's interesting. But what else did Miller do? I honestly didn't think it made this much sense for George Miller to be part of the Twilight Zone. He has a lot of imagination, and his use of atmosphere, cinematography, and score is great. I just felt misled watching it. The 10-minute movie segment is called Nightmare on 20,000 Feet, and it is a remake of the episode of the same name about a man on a plane who witnesses the attack of a creature, and starred John Lithgow. Yeah, the creature was the best part of this. Maybe it wasn't even George's fault, just that the original short is pretty weird and chaotic, just as he likes.
In the quiet town of Eastwick, where nothing ever changes.
In Witches of Eastwick, we see Michelle Pfeiffer, Susan Sarandon, and Cher as three independent housewives and best friends who start facing the fact they might be witches when a charming stranger mysteriously appears. This movie is so unhinged, so messy, and so bizarre at the same time. I only knew Jack Nicholson played some kind of representation of the devil, but what I actually needed to know was,
honey, you've got a big storm coming.
I love the leads. They're extremely beautiful and send the feminist message really well.
Hocus pocus.
6 out of 10.
Sometimes I wonder if people realize How incredible you truly are.
Lorenzo, well, it's a half-made movie. They told Miller, hey, we want you to make a movie about this kid who has a very rare condition, but his parents made this oil to save him and all the kids with the same symptoms. And he answered, okay, what is my material? Oh, not much. Just the important dates where stuff happened and a bunch of homemade videos from other patients. Just explain the disease in the easiest way possible. That's it. Okay, can I get Susan again? Yeah, sure, why not? And a non-Italian actor for the dad? Sure, why not? Mess, mess, mess. This movie is 70% composed of fades to black because there's not enough story to connect the dates Miller was given. The performances are kind of over the place, except for Lorenzo, but I appreciate how well they explain the illness with practical devices such as boards, dream sequences, and research. I truly appreciate this didn't rely heavily on religious themes, but expanding the story would have benefited it. You don't really care because every problem will eventually be solved, no matter how much it costs. And the characters don't have many personality. In fact, it ends on a rather positive note, when in reality you're forced to look at the real story and find out he died. 5 out of 10.
If I told you that the movies have a hidden purpose, what do you think it might be?
40,000 Years of Dreaming, or White Fellas Dreaming, A Century of Australian Cinema, is a documentary made for the British Film Institute, in which Miller puts together clips of various Australian films, not only celebrating his country's history, but also reinforcing the part of his style in which filmmaking becomes an adventure, while giving it some mystical features. Nothing much to say, I didn't watch it.
There was a test screening in Seattle, and the thing I noticed immediately in the test screening is the moment a caption came up, the mothers or fathers would turn and read the caption to the little kids. So we had the little mice, the 3 little mice, at the bottom of the frame saying, pork is very sweet meat, in their little mouse voices. And that, to me, those captions were really what glued the film together and made it much more cohesive. So that was a big moment in the life of that film.
Wait, what? Oh, babe, I love this movie. It was the first big success for the Kennedy Miller Company after Mad Max. It swept the box office and awards. Honestly, deserved. It reinvented animatronic technology for animals thanks to Jim Henson, and it has one of the most traumatic animal deaths I've ever seen. James Cromwell does a defining performance for the movie, being the only human who trusted in Babe's abilities and an amazing juxtaposition to fly. The farmer only has 16 lines, but his body gestures and commitment bring seriousness to the story.
So I was going to turn it down. And I visited a friend of mine in Connecticut, and he said, no, man, it's a free trip to Australia. And listen, if the picture fails, it's the pig's fault. You're just a supporter. So I thought, yeah, that's not too bad. We got to the end of the film. It's the day of the sheep herding contest. So the next shot is I have to turn to the pig and congratulate the pig. And I look up to say the line, and I see my reflection in the lens. And what I see is not me. I see this older man who reminds me a great deal of my father. And I have to say,
That'll do, pig. That'll do.
but what I hear in my head is, that'll do, Jamie. That'll do. Because this is the first time in my life that I've actually showed up on a set without my evaluations and my judgments and beating myself up and then projecting it outside, making a hash out of everything. I really showed up and said, look, no matter what happens to this little Australian film, I'm gonna be here every day and I'm gonna do the best that I can. My life changed, and I owe it to a pig.
And I love he's the only human we like because the rest of them are fat and portrayed really gross in both movies, which helps connect more with the animals in many ways. It's an inspirational tale about being kind to others, even if no one is kind to you. But I absolutely hate the mice both here and in the sequel. And Rex's backstory wasn't told very well, but besides that, I cried really hard. 8 out of 10. The only reason this is the less chaotic film in this list is because Miller barely had any involvement in it, only involved in the script. He co-wrote it and co-produced it, even if he wants to take the credit for the direction.
He can't leave. You're my lucky pig.
Now, it's well known what the dispute about how Miller takes so much credit for the first Babe and the eventual friendship breakdown with director Chris Noonan was like, to the point where he didn't even want to make a sequel in the first place until George took his place. Besides Mad Max, Babe Pig in the City has to be the cult classic of George Miller. I'm actually surprised that this was a flop, because it's way more chaotic and silly than the first one, with way more animals and a vibrant setting. They created this metropolis where Babe is stuck right before a pig competition with a farmer's wife and stays at this hotel with cats, monkeys, rats, etc.
My tummy hurts.
It does have the same message as the first Babe and has more hateful characters, and it's a bit easier in its resolution though. But it's worth watching. 6 out of 10.
I'm still hungry.
Where you see the little penguin dancing by himself when he's little. So I didn't know how to make the film, and then the wonderful cinematographer Andrew Leslie, who shot the Babe movies, went and shot Lord of the Rings, and for the first time showed me the first motion capture of Gollum. And I'd never heard of motion capture before, but the moment he showed it to me, I said, that's how we can tell Happy Feet. And we were able to motion capture Savion Glover. And so that little penguin dancing was a big moment for me.
Okay, well that figures. Man, I don't know what a Happy Feet was. I remember my dad bought me the DVD and I always watched just the beginning because the film somehow manages to get more and more depressing as it goes on. But this thumbnail pretty much explains that. I feel this was a movie meant for adults, so the experiment in changing that material to animated and family-friendly zones made it very weird. Starting up with the fact that the film is a metaphor for autism and not fitting it for being different. The intentions are there. I can feel Miller's need to represent his existential discontent with politics and religion, but this animation is such an ugly and realistic nightmare fuel. Glad to see animal logic improved and brought us those sick effects in Planet of the Apes and the Lego movies. At least the backgrounds, wide shots, and the snow effects are amazing. I love both of the roles of Robin Williams, and damn, Hugh Jackman's voice is like hearing Elvis all over again. The covers are great and the climax is very solid, even though it doesn't make a lot of sense in that chaotic third act. Like, dance can solve overfishing and xenophobia, I guess? A bit forced, really chaotic, badly paced, and really depressing. Side note, this movie was released around the day I was born, so I hope it didn't foreshadow my entire life. It doesn't quite work with the metaphors, and oh my god, those live action sequences at the end, I just can't. 5 out of 10.
Yeah, I heard an animal once do that, but then they rolled him over, he was dead.
What made you interested in returning to the wonderful world of Happy Feet?
Besides the check?
Yeah, besides that.
The idea of being with those guys again, to work with all of the amigos, Elijah, Sonia, just to have her in the same room. Hola, mira.
Hey, what's up? What's this? What's up?
We're coming to a deli lounge.
Oh, no, you aren't. You are here without your parents. This is kidnapping. Now go, shoot.
But we can't.
Huh?
We're fugitives.
Fugitive what?
Fugitives.
No.
Fleeing Emperorland.
No.
No Happy Feet.
What?
No Happy Feet.
What is it?
We're rebels
Huh?
seeking thrills and adventure and tasty snacks.
No matter how random and plainly family-friendly Happy Feet 2 is, the under pressure climax is cinema in the making. Besides that, I don't have much to say. The animation improves outstandingly, and I like that they went with a more digestible and simple story than the first one, with the message of teamwork and one could even say anti-racism. Maybe this change could have been related to the redirection of the producing company with the entering of Doug Mitchell.
Oh, and some of those tiny crustaceans, you know, the little ones that go...
Oh, yeah.
Now go.
The Krells, the humans, which confused me because they scratch off what happened in the first movie, everything. All the chaos, it was just too much, and it seems too forgettable as well. I don't remember a lot, and that shows it's just average. The pacing isn't great either. It's predictable, but it's cute. And I wasn't expecting to love Alan Tudyk's Bird Thing, or that both of these movies low-key steal Queen's most famous songs just because they wanted to. 5 out of 10.
No.
There's no other way to do this movie. It's not a green screen movie. We had to do it old school, practical effects, real vehicles, real people, real desert.
If I die, I live again.
Once again, George Miller revolutionized what practical effects and the action genre can offer. Mad Max Fury Road, it's literally a movie where Charlize Theron and Tom Hardy go somewhere and then come back while being chased by a bunch of weird guys and the great guitar man.
I still enjoy seeing it where they finally get on the road to chase Furiosa and Max as part of it. Then we push past these guys on the back of the doof wagon and the guys drumming, and then we come right round the front to see the speakers and the doof warrior with his guitar, and at the right moment he fires off this big plume of flames, and we see all the vehicles at the back and this great army that's giving chase to the war rig. I still enjoy seeing that show.
Not only he didn't bring back Mel Gibson, yeah, he do be old, to be honest, but he also modernized the franchise. Oh, you didn't like the lack of development in Road Warrior? Oh, you didn't like the comedy in Beyond Thunderdome? Well, this is pure non-stop bonkers, 120 minutes of mayhem. In my research, I saw comparisons with Akira Kurosawa's Run. He came back and reinvented the scales of the great Japanese samurai movies he made in his beginnings. Maybe all of these great elements caught the interest of people, and it managed to make almost $400 million at the box office. And yeah, I don't think it's the best. In Modern Joe is not really good, Max's trauma wasn't explored, and there's an awful lack of context and meaningful dialogue. It's extremely nihilistic and convenient. Some things weren't written for the sake of length, I guess. But what really brings it up for me is Junkie XL's electric and thrilling score. Holy cow, that's like being on the top point of a roller coaster for 2 hours straight. 7 out of 10. No one, absolutely no one, was expecting a fourth movie. It came and everyone had their mouth shut. Up until this year, Miller had only supervised the Kennedy Miller-Mitchell video game division, but it wasn't until 2016 that everything would come full circle.
And the Oscar goes to Jenny Bevan, Mad Max Fury Road.
Margaret Sixel, Mad Max Fury Road.
Mad Max Fury Road.
Mad Max Fury Road, Colin Gibson, production design, Lisa Thompson, set decoration.
Mad Max Fury Road, Chris Jenkins, Greg Woodloff, and Ben Osmo.
Mad Max Fury Road, Mark Mangini, and David White.
Fucking Mad Maxers! Let's hear it! Yeah!
The dude had done it, and all we had to do was wait for what was to come.
I've spoken to a number of directors, and particularly writer-directors, and they've all said a similar thing. They've said, you know it the instant they walk into the room. There's something about, after the first few utterances of the actor, you somehow feel whatever you vaguely have in the back of your mind about the character, however you imagine them, they seem to marry. It's similar to people say, well, why do you fall in love with someone instantly? Somehow there's the Venn diagrams of the character and the person overlap in some way.
Besides my unconditional love for the amazing Tilda Swinton and the heartwarming performance of Idris Elba, I think this movie is pretty rad. It has great storytelling, captivating visuals, and really serious intentions from George since probably Lorenzo's oil, although there's an abuse of CGI, but we'll delve into that with Furiosa. It's a very original twist on the usual genie cautionary tales that turns into a sort of weird tragic romance between an academic and the genie. You need to suspend your disbelief in the fantasy and surrealism of it. The romance feels a bit forced, and the ending of the stories, including the overarching movie, feels a little pretentious and dragged. If anything, the comedy is the only genre that does feel forced to the extent of interrupting the momentum of the movie. I think that after his worldwide ovation, he just thought, you know what? I've been working on this script for 20 years now, and I finally have enough support and confidence to make it. Furthermore, I want as many people as possible to be able to experience what I felt with this short story. 7 out of 10. He made almost an antithesis of Fury Road, but just as good, especially with this message of telling stories being the most powerful way of communication. We can't live without storytelling, it defines us.
These small details that you say, well, that's nothing to do with the story, but it's the details, that bring the audience in.
Let me ask you, Did we really need Furiosa? A 140-minute-long R-rated prequel movie of an acclaimed reboot in a franchise with a not-so-broad fandom after the pandemic in times when the word of mouth is the very first impulse to go to the theaters? Maybe you said yes, but I think this was disappointing. You can tell George wanted to do some things better. The scale is bigger, the length is bigger, and the budget is bigger. But it looks ugly, it's pretentious, it's underwhelming, and the best thing about it was the Mentos. Fight me. I don't know why we needed to get so fast into Immortal Joe's kingdom. I don't know why they thought bringing romance into Furiosa's character was unique enough for people to come and see the background story that they told us in less than 2 minutes on Fury Road. It's like they had a few ideas to cover over 18 years of Furiosa's life and just straight up stretched the action sequences as much as possible. But yes, Anya Taylor-Joy is beautiful. I love the third act is a callback to the original Mad Max in a sort of way. And I'm thankful that the chapter division wasn't as obnoxious as in Babe.
In my experience, the best way to tell action is to visualize it first. It might be just in your head, but so the best way, and I've always done it, is do storyboards. The problem with storyboards is that they're static. And in recent years now with new technology, we're doing what they used to call previs. But now we can do it in ways that are much more accessible, where you can actually do a virtual version of the movie in the same way that game engines do it. We adapted it to our version, having worked on Fury Road, and we call it Toy Box. But basically, we might sketch things out, then we start building it virtually. Now, once you get it to that stage, you have to render it in a form which you can communicate it to the actors and to the people who you're asking to distribute the film or finance the movie, and that's usually in script form. So you write it in a script form, not describing what happens, but kind of trying to evoke the experience of what happens so that they can read it with a kind of with a sense of the emotional flow of it.
In an interview, he said, "I just love action movies. For me, the most universal language and the purest syntax of cinema is in the action movies." Yeah, we can tell. 6 out of 10.
Oh my god, what is that? Oh my god, what is that?
Miller recalls director Peter Weir telling him, "You have to be alert, resilient, and prepared for anything. There are lots of stumbling blocks along the way, but you have to prevail." That I can admire from him. He's very committed, not only to his worlds, but also fighting to get his stories to the light. And I'm not just talking about the economic, legal, and temporal restraints Fury Road had, but that he has branched with a lot of resilience into comics, video games, and many more media, seeing the potential in what he makes when no one else does. Just please tell them it's best to let Happy Feet die.
There were a lot of dystopian stories and films, and particularly games, and the basic instinct was to desaturate everything, to make it very, almost more monochrome. And I thought, if we keep doing what's been done, it'll feel too familiar. It's almost become a trope to make things look desaturated. So that was a big influence on the look of Fury Road and now Furiosa. The other thing we picked up was, as I said, when the French said that these films are westerns on wheels, if you looked at all the classic westerns, they always shot day for night. The main reason they were shot day for night is because horses don't have headlights. So it's only when you have headlights that you need to shoot night for night in order to see the... Now, in the wasteland, it's definitely not conducive to your survival if you keep your headlights on, because people can see you from miles away. So you don't want to draw attention to yourself. So if you're traveling at night, as they were in Fury Road, escaping in the war rig across the wasteland, the last thing you want to do is put your headlights on. So we shot day for night.
His movies are all about the hero's journey, adding different genres and elements to tell the story in a new way. Babe with animatronics, Happy Feet with motion capture, Mad Max with IMAX, and so on. Heck, he even almost made the Justice League films, so that would have been literal superheroes' journeys.
When I went to Japan, they said, "Oh, Max is a samurai. You must have seen a lot of Kurosawa movies." And to my shame, I said, "Who's Kurosawa?" Which is terrible. When they told me, I made it my job to immediately go and see all the Kurosawa movies. Of course, what was so amazing about him, he took basically Hollywood cinema and reinterpreted it. I'm following in that sort of going down that path because, again, he was someone who was able to take cinema and make it his own and master all this stuff.
So many ideas, right? And the legacy his work has had is anything but underwhelming. Mad Max inspired Fallout and several fan films. The most recent one, Hope and Glory, is so good. I think he needs a more clear mindset because he's running out of time. The dude's almost 80 years old. I don't think he's in the mindset of Coppola of, oh, I'm gonna live 20 years more and I'll make way more movies. There are already plans for the next Mad Max movie called The Wasteland and a possible sequel with Tom Hardy set to return. But the future is uncertain, especially with how Furiosa is doing at the box office. If this is the end, it's been a really interesting and successful career. His only rotten movie is Happy Feet 2, but when compared to my rating, I can't but say he's overrated. Hey, that's just my opinion. Here's my ranking. You can follow me on my letterboxd at Julian De Vega. And like and subscribe on this video, by the way. I'd appreciate it, especially since making this video has taken me about a month and it was a really chaotic production, kind of like a production of George Miller. And remember,
That'll do, Pig. That'll do.
Over and out.
I mean, I'm surprised by some of the stuff I've seen in here. You know, it makes me want to keep sort of doing it, stimulated by the very conversation we've had here. I'm still doing it, and people say, why are you still doing it? And I say, well, I'm still really curious about it. It's changing. I'm surprised how everything is changing and how you're engaged in something that is ongoing. I mean, you can be making films for 1,000 years and never master it. There's too much to understand.